The day I signed my house away, my son brought champagne, not after. Not later that evening when they were back home celebrating without me. Right there, in my own kitchen, at the same table where I had fed him breakfast for 18 years, Darnell reached into the bag he'd carried in and pulled out a bottle of Moet. Brittany laughed and clapped her hands like a child at Christmas. The man in the gray suit, Mr. Aldridge, smiled the way people smile when a long negotiation has finally gone their way. I sat at that table and watched my son pop the cork. He didn't look at me when he did it. That's the part I keep coming back to. In that moment, the moment that should have been the hardest moment of my life, my son didn't look at me once. He looked at Brittany. He looked at the bottle. He looked at the ceiling where the champagne fizzed up and caught the morning light. But he did not look at his mother. I was 63 years old. I had just signed over the deed to the house I had lived in for 26 years. The house my husband Raymond and I had bought together in 1998 for $89,000, paid off penny by penny, sacrifice by sacrifice, until the day in 2019 when we made the last payment, and Raymond sat right in that kitchen and cried like a baby. Good tears, the kind that mean something. Raymond was gone now, had been for 4 years, and somewhere in those 4 years, something had shifted. Something I hadn't seen coming, or maybe something I hadn't been willing to see. There was a sheet of paper left behind on my table when they finally left, laughing on their way to their car. Mr. Aldridge's paperwork. A property valuation estimate, printed on Harper Aldridge Realty letterhead. $410,000. I sat in that kitchen for a long time after they drove away. The cornbread I had baked that morning was still warm on the counter. I had made it because Darnell always loved my cornbread. I had made it because some part of me, even then, was still trying to be his mother. I stared at that number. Then I turned the page over, and that's when I saw it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you who I am first, because that matters. It matters that you know who I was before all of this, before the lawyers, before the courtroom, before the moment everything I had spent my whole life building almost disappeared. My name is Josie Washington, and I did not go quietly. The signs were all there. I can see that now, clearly, the way you can only see clearly once you're on the other side of something. But when you love someone the way a mother loves her child, you don't read the signs. You explain them away. You soften them. You fold them up and put them in a drawer somewhere and tell yourself you were imagining things. I was not imagining things. I just loved my son too much to see straight. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, the youngest of 6 children in a house that was small and loud and full of love even when it was full of nothing else. My mother, Evelyn, cleaned other people's houses 6 days a week. My father, Curtis, worked the line at a steel plant until the plant closed and then worked whatever came next. Delivery, janitorial, whatever kept the lights on. They never complained. I never heard either one of them say life was unfair. They just worked, and they expected us to do the same. I was the one who got the scholarship. 1979, University of Alabama School of Nursing. I was 18 years old, and I had never been more than 40 miles from Birmingham in my life. I remember standing in the dormitory hallway the first night with my one suitcase and thinking, nobody handed you this. You earned it. Don't you dare waste it. I didn't waste it. 30 years at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. Critical care. The night shift for most of it, because the night shift paid a differential, and I needed every dollar. I have held the hands of people taking their last breath. I have stood in hospital corridors at 3 a.m. and delivered news that broke families apart. I have pushed back on doctors when they were wrong, and I have been right more times than they like to admit. I am not a woman who flinches. I am not a woman who waits for someone else to handle things. I am Josie Washington, and I have been handling things my entire life. The one thing I could never quite handle with clear eyes was Darnell. I met Raymond at Greater Bethel AME Church in the summer of 1985. He was 27, tall and quietly funny, the kind of man who remembered small things, your coffee order, the name of your sister's dog, the anniversary of something sad. We dated for 2 years, married in 1987, and moved into the house on Callaway Drive in Decatur, Georgia in 1998. Darnell was born in 1989. He came into the world loud and stubborn and beautiful, and from the first moment I held him, I understood that I would do anything for this child. Anything. I did. I worked night shifts so Raymond could be home with Darnell after school. I sold my mother's gold ring, the only thing she left me, to cover the gap in Darnell's college tuition when his scholarship fell short by $4,000 his junior year. I turned down a position in Charlotte that would have paid $12,000 more a year because Darnell was in 10th grade and had just made the basketball team, and I didn't want to uproot him. He never knew about the ring. I never told him. I think about that now. There's a memory I come back to often, especially in the years since all of this happened. Darnell was 16, and he had failed his driver's test for the first time. I drove to the DMV to pick him up, and he climbed into the passenger seat with that particular teenage shame, jaw tight, eyes fixed somewhere out the window, trying to hold himself together. I didn't say anything about the test. I just drove to Popeyes and got a 2-piece with biscuits, and we sat in the parking lot and ate, and I put on an old Teddy Pendergrass record on the radio because Raymond had shown me how to play it through my phone. And after a while, Darnell looked at me and said, "Mama, you're the only one who never makes me feel small." I kept that sentence in my heart for 27 years. I kept it right up until the morning he didn't look at me when he popped the champagne. Darnell grew up well, by every measure you'd use from the outside. MBA from Georgia State, a management position at a large insurance firm in Buckhead. He was sharp, well-dressed, comfortable in rooms that would have made his grandfather nervous. I was proud of him. I am still, in some complicated way I haven't fully worked out, proud of the boy he was. He married Brittany in 2015. Brittany was beautiful in the way that takes effort, always put together, always polished, always saying the right thing in the right tone. She called me Josie from the beginning, never Mom, and I told myself that was just her generation, her way, that it didn't mean anything. She brought wine when they visited. She asked questions about my health with an expression of concern that was, I thought at the time, genuine. I wanted to love her. I tried hard. My friend Gloria, she has lived next door to me for 25 years, knows me better than most blood relatives. Gloria never trusted Brittany. She told me once, about a year after the wedding, "Girl, I don't know what it is, but every time that woman comes over here, she looks at your house like she's pricing it." I laughed and told Gloria she had too much imagination. I should have listened to Gloria. I almost always should have listened to Gloria. Let me tell you what my life looked like before all of this. Before the gray suit and the papers and the champagne I didn't ask for. I was 63 years old, and I was, by any honest measure, doing fine. I had retired from Grady Memorial 2 years earlier. 30 years was enough, and my knees had opinions about the overnight shifts. I still volunteered at the community health clinic every Tuesday, taking blood pressure readings and helping older patients navigate their medication schedules. I was in the choir at Greater Bethel AME, had been for 20 years, second alto. I ran 3 miles every morning, something I'd started the year Raymond died, because I needed somewhere to put the grief that moving my body could absorb. My house was in good order. The mortgage had been paid off. My savings were solid. Raymond had been careful with money his whole life, and between his retirement accounts and mine, we had built something. Not wealthy, not by any stretch, but secure. The kind of security that takes decades to build and that no one hands you. I grew tomatoes in these raised beds along the south fence. I baked on Sunday mornings. I had dinner with Gloria every Friday, and every Thursday the women from church came over for what we called Bible study, but was honestly mostly coffee and conversation and putting the world to rights. And every morning before I started the coffee, I went out to the backyard and I put my hand on the magnolia tree Raymond had planted our first spring on Callaway Drive. He'd bought it from a nursery in Conyers and driven it home in the back of his Buick and planted it himself, talking to it the whole time the way he talked to everything he loved. Quietly, patiently, like he had all the time in the world. "Magnolia don't ask permission to bloom," he told me that afternoon, his hands still dirty from the planting. "They just do." He was gone now. 4 years. But the tree was still there, every spring covering itself in white blooms that smelled like something between honey and rain. That was my life. Small, maybe, but mine. Built with my own hands over 63 years of work and love and loss and getting back up. And then the visits started getting more frequent. In the beginning, I was glad. After Raymond died, the house had gotten quiet in a way that took some getting used to. Not bad quiet, just different quiet. The kind that reminds you constantly of the shape of what's missing. So when Darnell and Brittany started coming by more often, first twice a month, then every week, then twice a week, I told myself it was love. It was my son stepping up. It was what Raymond had asked for. Raymond's last good week, before the morphine made conversation difficult, he had held my hand and said, "Josie, promise me you'll let people take care of you sometimes. You've been carrying everything your whole life." I had promised. I thought Darnell was honoring that. But looking back, now that I can see clearly, the visits had a quality to them that I kept not quite naming. Darnell walked through the house differently than he used to, not looking at me or at the photographs on the wall or at the things that made it a home, looking at the structure, the square footage, the way the light came through the south windows. "Mama, these stairs are steep," he said one evening, running his hand along the banister Raymond had refinished himself in 2007. "I've been on these stairs for 26 years, I said. "I know, but you're not getting younger." He said it gently. That was the thing. He always said it gently. Brittany started asking about the neighborhood, property values, whether I'd thought about simplifying. She said the word like it was a kindness, simplifying, as if the life I had built was too complicated, too much, a burden I should be grateful to set down. "Josie, the houses on this street are going for so much right now," she said one evening, looking out the kitchen window at the back garden. "You could really set yourself up. Get into one of those beautiful communities where everything's taken care of." "Everything's taken care of here," I said. "I take care of it." She smiled. The smile didn't reach her eyes. I told myself I was being uncharitable. Brittany had lost her own mother to a nursing home. I knew that, knew the guilt she carried about it. Of course she worried about old women living alone. Of course she projected. I told myself a lot of things. About 3 months before everything happened, Gloria called me one evening while I was doing dishes. "Josie, there was a man outside your house today, while you were at the clinic, suit and tie, taking photographs. I went out and asked him who he was." My hands went still in the soapy water. "What did he say?" "Said he was doing a neighborhood survey. But Josie, he was photographing your house specifically. The roof, the foundation, the backyard. Did you get a name?" "He gave me a card." A pause. "Aldridge and Partners Realty." I stood at my kitchen sink for a long time after we hung up. Then I dried my hands and told myself it was nothing. I found out on a Tuesday. Not because I was looking, not because I had set some kind of trap or because my suspicions had finally sharpened into action. I found out the way you find out most of the terrible things in life. By accident, in an ordinary moment, when your guard was down because you had no reason to think you needed one. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late August. Darnell and Brittany had stopped by after lunch, the way they'd been doing regularly now, arriving with food containers and easy smiles and that quality of attention that I had been mistaking for love. Brittany had brought a chicken and rice casserole in one of those glass dishes with the snap-on lids. She set it on the counter and we talked for a while about nothing in particular, and then she and Darnell walked through to the back porch to sit in the afternoon shade, the way Raymond and I used to do. I was clearing the coffee cups from the table when I noticed the phone, Brittany's phone, face up on the kitchen table, screen dark. I picked it up to carry it to her, the same automatic courtesy you extend to anyone in your home, and the screen lit up in my hand. A text message preview, from a number with no name attached to it. I was not trying to read it. I want to be clear about that. I am not a woman who reads other people's messages, but the preview was right there, fully visible, and my eyes read it the way eyes read things before your brain has time to intervene. Comps in that zip code averaging 415,000. If you move fast before she changes her mind, you're looking at 380,000 clear profit after fees. I stood at my kitchen table and read those words 3 times. Before she changes her mind. I set the phone back down exactly where it had been, faced the same direction, same angle. Then I walked to the counter and stood with my back to the room and stared at the casserole dish Brittany had brought, with its snap-on lid and its careful presentation, and I felt something move through my chest that I couldn't name yet. Not quite fear, not quite understanding, something in between, the sensation of a floor that you've walked on your whole life beginning, very quietly, to shift beneath your feet. I carried the phone out to the back porch. My face was easy. My voice was easy. "Brittany, honey, you left this inside." She took it from me with a smile. Darnell was talking about something, a restaurant he wanted to try in Inman Park. I sat down and I listened and I smiled and I said the right things at the right times. And inside I was doing what I had learned to do in 30 years of critical care nursing. I was staying calm, assessing, not reacting until I understood what I was dealing with. They left an hour later. I stood on the front porch and waved until the car turned the corner. Then I went inside and sat down at the kitchen table and I let myself feel it, before she changes her mind. That sentence assumed something. It assumed there was already a plan. It assumed my mind had already been steered in a direction by someone, and that the only variable left was the timing. The message wasn't from someone being introduced to this idea. It was from someone already deep inside it. I made myself go through the alternative explanations, the way I'd make a trainee nurse go through a differential diagnosis. Could it be about another property? Could Brittany be doing real estate work on the side? Could I have misread it? No, and no. That zip code, my zip code, Decatur, Georgia, and she, not the owner, not the seller, she, a specific woman whose mind might change. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the bed Raymond and I had shared for 32 years, and I stared at the ceiling and I made myself think clearly. In the morning, I would need information. Before I said a word to anyone, before I confronted anyone, before I did anything at all, I needed to know what I was actually dealing with. I needed facts. 3 days later, I had them. Not all of them, not yet, but enough to understand that I had not been imagining things. I Googled Aldridge and Partners Realty, the name from the card Gloria had saved. The website loaded clean and professional. Photographs of smiling older couples, language about estate transitions and senior asset management, and simplifying your legacy. Beneath the surface of those careful words was the shape of what they actually did. They bought homes from elderly people, quickly, quietly, at prices that were fair enough to avoid legal challenge, but low enough to leave significant profit on the table for the buyer. I searched further, found a consumer complaint filed with the Georgia Real Estate Commission 2 years prior. Since resolved, nothing actionable, but the complaint described a pattern. A family member bringing in Aldridge as a care consultant, documents presented quickly without independent legal advice. Elderly homeowner left with reduced options once the paperwork was signed. I read that complaint twice. Then I searched Darnell's name alongside Aldridge's. There it was. Not hidden. Just not something I would ever have thought to look for before. A LinkedIn connection between Darnell and an associate broker at Aldridge and Partners. Connected for 3 years. 3 years. I sat with that for a long time. That evening, Darnell called me on his regular Sunday check-in. Even though it was a Thursday, the calls had become more frequent lately, which I now understood differently than I had before. We talked for a few minutes about nothing. Then, keeping my voice as light as I'd ever kept it in my life, I said, "Darnell, you ever hear of a company called Aldridge Realty? They left a flyer on the door." A pause. It lasted perhaps 3 seconds. In normal conversation, 3 seconds is nothing. But I had spent 30 years watching people, patients, family members, doctors, in moments when they had something to hide. I knew what a pause that last 3 seconds actually means. "Aldridge? No, I don't think so, Mama. Why?" "Oh, nothing. Just junk mail, I think." "You should throw it out. You don't need to be dealing with solicitors." "You're right," I said. "I'll throw it out." I hung up the phone and sat in Raymond's chair and let the full weight of it settle over me. My son had just lied to my face. Not a complicated lie. Not an elaborate one. A plain, simple, deliberate lie, delivered without hesitation after a 3-second pause that told me everything. I was 63 years old. I had raised this man. I had fed him and sacrificed for him and held him when he cried, and been the one person in the world who never made him feel small. And he had looked me in the eye. Through a phone, yes, but I could feel his eyes even through a phone line. And he had lied to me. That pause, I said out loud, to myself, alone in that room. 3 seconds, but I know what a lie looks like. September came in hot that year. The kind of Atlanta heat that doesn't apologize, that sits on your chest and makes everything feel heavier than it is. Darnell called to say he and Brittany were coming by Saturday morning. They wanted to take me to brunch, somewhere nice in Decatur Square. I said that sounded lovely. I baked a pan of peach cobbler the night before because I needed something to do with my hands. They arrived with a man I had not been told about. He was introduced to me as Mr. Aldridge, the same name, now with a face, late 50s, salt and pepper hair, a gray suit that fit well enough to cost something. He had the practiced warmth of a man who delivered bad news for a living and had learned to make it sound like good news. "Mrs. Washington, what a beautiful home," he said, shaking my hand. Darnell has told me so much about you. I smiled. I offered coffee. I watched. They sat at my kitchen table, all three of them on one side, the way people sit when they have something to present. And Darnell began. He had prepared for this. I could tell by the way he'd ordered his words, the way Brittany nodded at the right intervals, the way Mr. Aldridge opened his leather portfolio with the timing of a man who had done this before. Mama, we need to talk seriously about your future. I looked at my son. He was 44 years old, well-dressed, confident. The boy who had sat in a Popeye's parking lot with me and cried over a failed driving test was somewhere behind those careful eyes. He did not look small. He had simply learned a different way to be large. They talked for 20 minutes. Darnell talked about the stairs, about the yard maintenance, about what would happen if I had a fall and couldn't reach the phone. Brittany talked about her mother, how Dorothy had been found on the floor of her apartment 4 hours after a fall, the guilt Brittany still carried, how she couldn't live with herself if the same thing happened to me. Couldn't live with herself. I filed that away. Mr. Aldridge talked about Magnolia Point Retirement Village, showed me photographs on his laptop. Attractive rooms, a dining hall that looked like a restaurant, a garden, women my age laughing in a craft room. It's beautiful, Brittany said softly, leaning toward me. Josie, you deserve to be somewhere you're truly taken care of. And then came the papers, a general power of attorney, giving Darnell complete legal authority over my financial and real estate affairs. A deed transfer, moving my home into his name to facilitate the care arrangements. A Magnolia Point admissions agreement. A form from my bank authorizing account access. Mr. Aldridge talked through each one. His voice was a low, steady river of legal language. Words I knew individually, but that lost their shape when he strung them together into sentences that kept flowing before I could catch the meaning of the one before. Darnell said, "It's just paperwork, Mama. It's all standard." Brittany squeezed my hand. And God help me. God help me because I have asked him to ever since. I thought of Raymond in that hospital bed. Let people take care of you sometimes, Josie. You've been carrying everything your whole life. I picked up the pen. I signed. I signed the power of attorney. I signed the deed transfer. I signed the Magnolia Point agreement. I signed the bank authorization. One after another, my hand forming the letters of my name, Josie May Washington, on lines that Mr. Aldridge pointed to with a silver pen. When it was over, Darnell stood up. He did not look at me first. He looked at Brittany, and they exchanged a look that I will carry in my memory for the rest of my life. The look of two people who have just completed a transaction they have been working toward for a very long time. Then he kissed my forehead. Thank you, Mama. You won't regret this. And then he reached into the bag by his chair and brought out the champagne. They left 45 minutes later, still laughing, Brittany's voice carrying down the front walk and into the street. I stood at the kitchen window and watched the car back out of the driveway. I watched it until it was gone. On the kitchen table, Mr. Aldridge had left behind a single sheet of paper. It must have been tucked into the back of his folder and slipped out without notice. I picked it up. It was a property valuation estimate. My address, my house, $410,000. I stared at that number for a long time. Then I turned the page over. And there, on the back, handwritten in pencil and handwriting I recognized as clearly as I recognized my own face. Magnolia Point, 3 years covered from proceeds. After 3 years, reassess continuation of care funding. Darnell's handwriting. I had looked at it on birthday cards and school papers and grocery lists for 44 years. I knew every loop and angle of it. Reassess continuation of care funding. Not a guarantee. Not a commitment. A reassessment. After 3 years, they would decide whether to keep paying for my care. And below that line, in Brittany's rounder, more careful script. Net clear after MP fees, approximately 3 years, $280,000. I sat down in my chair at that table, Raymond's chair, the one with the worn armrest on the left side where he always rested his elbow, and I held that piece of paper in both hands and I read it again. They had done the math. They had sat together somewhere, their kitchen table, their living room, wherever it was, and they had worked out exactly how much my house was worth, exactly how much it would cost to keep me warehoused in Magnolia Point for 3 years, and exactly how much they would clear when all the numbers were settled. $280,000. That was what I was worth to them. That was the value they had assigned to 63 years of a life. "He didn't hug me first," I said out loud to the empty kitchen. He hugged her. That night I did not cry. I want to be precise about this, because it matters. There are different kinds of not crying. There is the not crying of someone holding themselves together with effort, white-knuckling through the emotion. And there is the not crying of someone who has moved through shock and out the other side into something colder and clearer. By midnight, I had moved through the shock. I sat at the kitchen table with the paper in front of me, and I thought about money. Specifically, how much did Darnell have access to now? The power of attorney I had signed was general. Mr. Aldridge had used that word, general, without pausing on it long enough for me to understand what it meant. A general power of attorney is not limited. It does not specify particular accounts or particular transactions. It says this person may act on my behalf in all financial and legal matters. All matters. I thought about my savings account at First National on Commerce Drive. 15 years with the same bank, the same branch, the same manager. Dwight Okafor, who had known Raymond and me since we opened our first joint account in 2001. I thought about Raymond's retirement account, the one he had built over 32 years of careful contributions that had passed to me when he died, that I had kept in his name on the account documents because I hadn't been ready to change it, because changing it meant he was really gone. I thought about the beneficiary designations on that account. At 3 a.m, I was still sitting at the table, and that is when I said it out loud for the first time. Not as a question, not with tears, just as a statement of plain fact. My son tried to take my house. Saying it out loud made it real, and then something happened that I did not expect. I got angry, not the hot, shaking anger of someone who has been surprised. The cold, clear anger of someone who has fully understood the situation and decided that it is unacceptable. The kind of anger I had felt once, years ago, when a senior physician at Grady had overridden a medication order that I knew was wrong, and a patient had nearly died because of it. The kind of anger that doesn't raise its voice. The kind that gets to work. I stood up, went to the back door, walked out into the yard in my nightgown, and stood at the magnolia tree in the dark. The night was warm, the air thick with the smell of late summer, and the tree stood still and enormous above me, its leaves catching the light from the neighbor's porch lamp. Raymond had planted this tree, with his own hands, talking to it quietly, the way he talked to everything he loved. Magnolia don't ask permission to bloom, Josie. They just do. I put my hand on the bark, closed my eyes. No, I said. This is not how my story ends. I went back inside. I sat at the desk in the small room off the hallway. Raymond's study, where he had kept his files and his books, and an old radio he liked to listen to on Saturday mornings. I turned on the desk lamp, took out a legal pad and a pen. At the top of the page, I wrote 3 words. What did I sign? And then I started writing everything I remembered. Every document, every name on every document, every phrase I could recall from Mr. Aldridge's steady river voice presentation. I wrote down Aldridge's company name and the LinkedIn connection to Darnell. I wrote down Magnolia Point. I wrote down the message I had seen on Brittany's phone. I wrote down Darnell's pause on the phone, 3 seconds, and what it meant. I wrote down $31,000. Check if Darnell has accessed accounts. I did not know yet that he already had, but I was going to find out. Then I sat back and looked at what I had written, and I let myself think about the hardest question. What are my options? I was 63 years old. I had already signed the papers. I was not a lawyer. Darnell was a financial professional with connections and resources and a plan he had been building for at minimum 3 years. And I was, what? A retired nurse with a legal pad and a desk lamp and a magnolia tree? And then another voice answered that question. My own voice, but clearer. You are Josie Washington. You grew up in Birmingham with nothing, and you made something. You kept patients alive at 3 a.m. when the odds said not to bother. You buried your husband with grace and kept going. You have been carrying things your entire life, and not one of those things has broken you. You are not going to let this be the one that does. I thought about the ring, my mother's gold ring, the one I had sold to pay Darnell's tuition. I had never told him. I had never wanted him to feel the weight of it, the real cost of what it had taken to get him where he was. But here, alone at 3 a.m, I let myself feel it. He knew I would sacrifice anything for him, and he used it. That thought did not make me cry. It made me pick up the pen. I wrote, Call Gloria, 7 a.m. I wrote, find an elder law attorney, pro bono if possible. I wrote, go to First National, check every account. I wrote, get copies of everything I signed. I wrote last at the bottom of the page and underlined it twice. Do not tell Darnell anything until you know everything. Then I went to the window and looked out at the magnolia tree, still and dark in the backyard. Raymond had said magnolias don't ask permission. They just bloom. I had been asking permission my whole life, asking Raymond for his opinion, asking the hospital administration for consideration, asking Darnell in every small, quiet way to be worthy of what I had given him. I was done asking. I spent 30 years keeping other people alive, I said to the dark yard and the still tree and the memory of the man who had planted it. It's time to keep myself alive. I turned off the desk lamp, went to bed. I didn't sleep, but I lay there in the dark with my list, and for the first time since Tuesday afternoon, I did not feel afraid. I felt something harder than afraid. I felt ready. I called Gloria at 7 o'clock exactly. She picked up on the second ring, the way she always does. Gloria has never been a woman who lets the phone ring while she decides whether she feels like talking. She either answers or she doesn't, and with me, she always answers. I said, Gloria, I need you, right now. Bring coffee. She said, I'll be there in 10 minutes. She was there in 8. She came through the back door the way she had been coming through my back door for 25 years, without knocking, straight to the kitchen, already reading the room before she'd set her thermos down. She looked at my face, looked at the legal pad on the table, looked at the pen I was still holding, and she pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. Tell me everything, she said. So I did. I told her about the message on Brittany's phone, about the LinkedIn connection between Darnell and Aldridge, 3 years old, about the papers I had signed and the bottle of champagne and the note on the back of the valuation sheet. After 3 years, reassess continuation of care funding. In my son's handwriting. Gloria listened without interrupting. That is one of the things I love most about her. She knows when a woman needs to be heard straight through before she needs to be helped. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Renee Patton. Who? Attorney, elder law. She helped Marvella Davis last year. You remember Marvella from the third pew? Her nephew tried to get power of attorney by claiming she was incompetent. Renee Patton took the case pro bono and had the whole thing reversed in 3 weeks. Gloria was already reaching into her purse for her phone. I have her number right here. I saved it after what happened to Marvella because I thought, Lord forgive me for thinking it, I thought someday one of us might need it. She slid the phone across the table. I looked at the number. My hand was steady when I dialed. Attorney Renee Patton answered on the third ring. Her voice was professional and unhurried, the voice of a woman who is used to receiving hard news calmly and has learned not to let urgency in a caller's voice become urgency in her own. I told her my situation in plain, orderly language, the documents I had signed, the timeline, the financial transactions I suspected had already taken place, the note in Darnell's handwriting, the champagne. When I finished, she was quiet for exactly the length of time it takes a careful person to think. Then she said, Mrs. Washington, what you're describing is textbook undue influence combined with potential elder financial exploitation. The speed of these transactions, the absence of independent legal counsel for you, the immediate financial benefit to your son, every element is there. A brief pause. How fast can you get me copies of everything you signed? How does this afternoon sound? The first thing she told me, before strategy, before next steps, before anything else, was this. Don't sign anything else, don't agree to anything else, and don't let them know you've spoken to me. Understood, I said. And Mrs. Washington, you did the right thing calling today, but we need to move quickly. When are they planning to move you to Magnolia Point? They said Monday. Another pause, shorter this time. Then we file Monday morning, first thing, before they can get you in that car. But first, I needed to know what else was already gone. Gloria drove me to First National Bank on Commerce Drive. It was a Friday morning in late September, the sky the particular clear blue that Atlanta gets in early fall when the heat finally begins to relent. I remember thinking how ordinary the morning looked, how much the world outside resembled any other Friday morning, and how completely different my interior landscape was. Dwight Okafor had been the manager at this branch for 12 years. He had attended Raymond's funeral. He had sent me a card on the 1-year anniversary of Raymond's death, a handwritten card, not printed, because he was that kind of man. When I sat down across from his desk and told him what I was there for, his face changed. He pulled up my accounts on his computer, and I watched him read what was on the screen, and I watched his expression go from professional neutrality to something that a careful man like Dwight Okafor could not quite contain. He looked up at me. "Mrs. Washington." He stopped, started again. "Darnell came in Monday morning. He had a general power of attorney document. He added himself as joint account holder on your primary savings and initiated a transfer." The room was very quiet. "How much?" My voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere outside my body. $31,000. He left $2,000 in your checking account. Dwight folded his hands on the desk. "He said it was for your care arrangements." $2,000. In 30 years of working, of saving, of going without, $2,000 was what they had decided I needed. Enough for immediate expenses, as if I were a child being given an allowance. "Dwight," I said carefully, "Raymond's retirement account, the one that transferred to me when he passed, is the beneficiary still?" I watched Dwight's face, and I had my answer before he spoke. "The beneficiary was changed last month, Mrs. Washington. It now lists Darnell as sole beneficiary. The retirement account. 32 years of Raymond's working life. Every Friday when he had moved money from his paycheck into that account instead of spending it, every year he had increased his contribution percentage instead of buying the new car he wanted. Every careful, patient decision he had made so that I would be secure when he was gone. It was gone, changed on a form I had never seen, in a transaction I had never authorized, with the signature of a man who held the power of attorney I had signed at my own kitchen table while the cornbread was still warm on the counter. I looked down at my hands. Raymond had held these hands. "If I can prove the power of attorney was obtained improperly," I said slowly. "Can it be reversed?" "With a court order," Dwight said. "Yes." Gloria's hand found my arm as we walked out of the bank into the clear September morning. I let her hold it. I didn't speak until we were in her car with the doors closed. Then I said, "He took Raymond's money." Gloria didn't say anything. She just held my arm tighter. "Raymond worked 32 years for that account." I looked straight ahead through the windshield at the ordinary Friday morning street. "And Darnell changed a beneficiary form and took it." The cold clarity I had found the night before at Raymond's desk, that hard, clean anger, had not gone anywhere. It was still there. But beneath it now was something else, something that lived deeper, in the part of me that had kissed Darnell's forehead when he had a fever and waited up until he came home safe and sold my mother's ring so he could finish college. Grief, plain and simple. Not for the money, for the boy I thought I had raised. I allowed myself 30 seconds of that grief, sitting in Gloria's car on a Friday morning in September. Then I said, "Take me to Renee Patton's office." We spent 3 hours with Renee Patton that afternoon. Her office was on the second floor of a converted Victorian on Ponce de Leon, small and organized and lined with the kind of bookshelves that belong to someone who actually reads what's on them. She had a paralegal named Sandra who took notes in silence and brought us water without being asked, and the two of them together had the quality of a team that had done this kind of work many times and understood its weight. Renee read every document I had brought, copies from Aldridge's office, bank statements, the valuation sheet with Darnell's handwritten notes on the back. She read without commenting, which I respected. When she finished, she turned the pages face down on her desk and looked at me. "We're filing 3 things Monday morning," she said. "First, a petition to revoke the power of attorney on the grounds of undue influence and absence of independent legal counsel. Second, a temporary restraining order preventing any sale or further transfer of your property. Third, a motion to freeze the joint account your son created." "Can you get all 3 granted?" "I can file all 3. The restraining order I'm confident about. Given your age, the speed of the transactions, and the absence of any independent advice to you, the bar for a temporary order is not high. The account freeze will argue on the grounds that the POA itself is under challenge." She paused. "The hearing on the full petition will be scheduled for the following week. That's where we make the real case. And if they argue I'm incompetent, that I didn't understand what I was signing because my mind is going?" Renee looked at me steadily. "Is there any medical basis for that claim?" "None. I have my annual physical every October. Perfect cognition scores. My doctor will tell you I am one of the sharpest patients she has." "Then let them try." She said it quietly, but with a certainty that settled something in my chest. Mrs. Washington, I have been doing elder law for 19 years. When families try to claim incompetence against a woman who clearly has all her faculties, who found an attorney, assembled her documents, and walked into my office with a legal pad full of organized notes, it tends not to play well in front of a judge. She allowed herself a small smile. Come back Sunday afternoon. We'll prepare your testimony. I spent Saturday at Gloria's house because Renee had advised me not to be alone, and because Gloria had offered with the particular firmness that means the offer is not optional. Saturday evening, Gloria called 4 women from our church circle and told them simply, Josie needs us. Within 2 hours, her living room held 5 women. Gloria, Patricia, whose daughter had once tried something similar with her lake house, Marvella, who had been through her own version of this with her nephew Dorothy from the choir, who brought sweet potato pie without being asked, and Nancy, who worked part-time at a law office downtown and knew the procedural landscape. They sat with me for 4 hours. Patricia held both my hands and said, You're doing exactly the right thing. My daughter didn't speak to me for 18 months after I fought back, but my house is still mine, and my life is still mine, and that's what matters. Marvella said, Renee Patton is the real thing. Trust her. Nancy walked me through what to expect in the courtroom. How to sit, how to speak, what a judge looks for when assessing competence, what questions Darnell's attorney would likely ask, and how to answer without giving them anything to use. And Gloria just kept the coffee coming, and every so often looked at me across the room with an expression that said, I see you. You are not alone in this. I had spent so many years being the one who held other people up, sitting in that room, being held. It was unfamiliar and necessary in equal measure. Sunday afternoon I met with Renee and we prepared for Monday. Monday morning, 6:45 a.m. My phone lit up on Gloria's nightstand. Darnell, calling to confirm the 10 o'clock pickup to Magnolia Point. I did not answer. He called again at 7, at 7:15, at 7:30, 3 calls in rapid succession. Then silence. At 8 o'clock, Gloria drove me to the DeKalb County Courthouse. Renee met us on the front steps with Sandra and a notary. We filed all 3 motions before 9 a.m. At 9:47, my phone rang. Not Darnell this time. Brittany. I watched the screen light up and go dark. Light up and go dark. At 10:15, the time Darnell should have been pulling into my driveway to find me packed and waiting, my phone rang again. A number I didn't recognize. I showed it to Renee. That's Aldridge's office number, she said. How do you know? Because I've seen it before. She looked at my phone with an expression that was not quite satisfaction, but was close to it. They know. Good, I said. The word came out of me with a quiet finality that surprised even me. Good. Let them know. That afternoon, Darnell came to Gloria's house alone. No Brittany, no briefcase. Just my son standing on Gloria's front porch holding a small bouquet of flowers. Yellow carnations, not my favorite, with an expression on his face that I recognized from 44 years of motherhood. The face he made when he had done something wrong and needed it to go away. Gloria opened the door. This is a family matter, Gloria, he started. Then you can discuss it out here on the porch, Gloria said. She did not move from the doorway. I stepped up behind her. Darnell's eyes found mine. For a moment we just looked at each other, mother and son on opposite sides of a threshold that had become, somehow, the distance between 2 entirely different understandings of what family means. Mama. His voice cracked. Genuine or performed? I was no longer certain I could tell the difference, and that loss was its own kind of grief. Please, just talk to me. Darnell, I said. My voice was even. I want my $31,000 back in my account within 48 hours. I want the beneficiary on your father's retirement account changed back to my name before Friday. That's all I have to say today. Mama, if you'd just let me explain. 48 hours, I said. Gloria closed the door. The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined. Wood-paneled, fluorescent lit, with the particular institutional stillness of a room where serious things happen on a regular basis. Renee sat beside me at one table. Darnell and his attorney, a sharp-featured man named Gregory Walsh, who wore the expression of someone always calculating his next sentence, sat at the other. And then Judge Patricia Holloway entered. She was 57 years old. Black woman. Silver-streaked natural hair cut close. She moved through the courtroom with the unhurried authority of someone who has long since stopped needing to prove anything to anyone. She sat, surveyed the room over the top of her reading glasses, and opened the case file. I felt for the first time all week that I was in a room where the truth might actually matter. Walsh presented Darnell's case smoothly. His client had acted out of genuine concern. Josie showed signs of cognitive difficulty. Missed appointments, confusion about finances, increasing isolation. The power of attorney and care arrangements were made for her protection. Magnolia Point was a highly rated facility. Everything had been done out of love. Renee Patton cross-examined Brittany first. Mrs. Washington, you testified that Josie was missing appointments. Can you give me a specific example? She missed several family dinners. Did she miss them or decline the invitations? A pause. I suppose she declined. And the stove being left on, did you personally witness this? Michael told me. She stopped, corrected herself. Darnell told me. So you didn't see it yourself? No. Her utility bills. Was her electricity shut off at any point? Her water? Not that I know of. So her bills were being paid on time. Renee let that sit for a moment. One more question. When Josie signed the power of attorney, you were present. Did she have her own attorney there to explain the documents? Mr. Aldridge explained everything. Mr. Aldridge, who stood to earn a commission on the house sale. Walsh objected. Judge Holloway sustained it, but she was looking at Brittany over her glasses with an expression that required no translation. Then came the moment that changed everything. Renee stood. Your Honor, I'd like to call Dorothy Mae Harrison. A murmur from Darnell's side of the room. Brittany turned sharply. Dorothy Harrison was 71 years old. She walked to the witness stand slowly but steadily, a small woman in a navy dress with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She sat down. She looked at Brittany the way only a mother can look at a daughter who has disappointed her, with love and sorrow and absolute refusal to look away. Brittany's face went white. Mrs. Harrison, Renee said gently, you are Brittany Washington's mother. Is that correct? I am. Did your daughter speak to you about this property in the months before these documents were signed? Dorothy folded her hands in her lap. She did. About 6 months before all this happened, Brittany called me and told me that they had a plan to move her mother-in-law to a care facility and sell the house. She paused. She said, and I'm quoting my own child, Mama, once we get that property sold, we're set. The courtroom was absolutely silent. I told her that was wrong, Dorothy continued, her voice quiet and unwavering. That Josie Washington was a healthy, capable woman who had every right to her own home. I told Brittany I wanted no part of it. Another pause. She stopped calling me after that. Brittany stood up. Mama, sit down, Judge Holloway said. Not loudly. She didn't need to be loud. Brittany sat down. I took the stand after Dorothy. Renee had told me, speak plainly, speak factually, do not perform emotion. You don't need to perform anything. Just tell the truth and let the truth do its work. So I did. I told the story simply. The visits, the papers, the champagne, the note on the back of the valuation sheet in Darnell's handwriting, the text message on Brittany's phone, the 3-second pause when I asked Darnell about Aldridge on the phone, the $31,000 moved from my account, Raymond's retirement account, beneficiary changed without my knowledge. Walsh cross-examined me. Mrs. Washington, isn't it true that managing a home of this size alone can be overwhelming for a woman your age? I have managed it for 26 years. It does not overwhelm me. You're 63, living alone. Isn't it reasonable for your son to worry? Worrying about someone, I said, and stealing from them are two different things. Walsh moved on quickly. Then Judge Holloway leaned forward and looked at Darnell directly. Mr. Washington, your attorney has argued that you transferred your mother's savings for the purpose of funding her care. Why did you move the money to a joint account in your name rather than leaving it in her name with you as an authorized signatory, which would have achieved the same purpose without removing her control? Darnell's attorney started to speak. Judge Holloway held up one hand without looking at him. I'm asking your client. Darnell straightened his jacket. I needed to be able to act quickly in case of emergency. A limited power of attorney for medical and financial emergencies would have accomplished that. Why did you need general, unrestricted control? Darnell said nothing. Walsh leaned over and whispered something. Darnell nodded slightly and said, On the advice of my attorney, you've already answered, Judge Holloway said quietly. Then Walsh made his final argument. It was polished, organized, built around the claim that I was too emotionally fragile after Raymond's death to manage my own affairs, that the grief of widowhood had impaired my judgment, and that Darnell had acted, however imperfectly, out of genuine concern. Renee rose for her response. She was brief. She placed 2 documents on the judge's bench. The first, my medical records from the past 3 years, including annual cognitive assessments, all within normal range, most above average for my age group. The second, a printed record, obtained through legal discovery, of Darnell's internet search history. Your Honor, in the 8 weeks before these documents were signed, Mr. Washington conducted the following searches from his personal computer. Renee read without inflection. Luxury villa rentals, Amalfi Coast. 5-star hotels, Santorini, Greece. Vacation property listings, Turks and Caicos. Investment property, ROI calculator. She set the paper down. This is the search history of a man consumed by worry about his elderly mother. The courtroom was very quiet. Darnell's face had gone a particular shade that I recognized, the shade it turned when he was caught in something and could not find a way out. I had seen it when he was 9 years old and had broken a lamp and lied about it. I had seen it less often as he'd grown older and gotten better at hiding things. But it was there now, unmistakable. Judge Patricia Holloway reviewed her notes for a long moment. The courtroom held its breath. Then she looked up. It is the finding of this court that Josie May Washington is of sound mind and fully capable of managing her own affairs. Her voice was even and absolute. The general power of attorney signed on September 14th is hereby revoked in its entirety on the grounds of undue influence and absence of independent legal counsel for the petitioner. She turned a page. The deed transfer of the property at 1847 Callaway Drive, Decatur, Georgia is void and of no legal effect. The property is restored to sole ownership of Josie May Washington, effective immediately. Another page. Mr. Washington, you will return all funds removed from your mother's accounts, $31,000, within 72 hours, or face charges for elder financial abuse under Georgia Code Section 30-5-8. The beneficiary designation on the retirement account will be restored to Mrs. Washington's name by court order within the same time frame. She set down her papers and looked at Darnell. Mr. Washington, your mother spent 30 years keeping strangers alive at 3 in the morning. She kept your father alive with her own hands, and this is what you decided she deserved. Not a question, a verdict on the kind of man he had become. We're done here, Judge Holloway said. I sat very still. Renee's hand found mine under the table. In the gallery behind me, I heard Gloria make a sound that was not quite a word, something between a prayer and a breath released after being held too long. I was still sitting at that table when Darnell and Walsh and Brittany gathered their papers and filed out of the courtroom. Darnell did not look at me as he passed. It was over, I said quietly, to no one, to everyone, to Raymond. And I was still standing. The $31,000 was back in my account, my name, no joint holders, within 48 hours. Raymond's retirement account was restored to my name by court order on Thursday. The deed to 1847 Callaway Drive was re-recorded at the county clerk's office that same week. When I held the new copy in my hands, Josie May Washington, sole owner, I read it 3 times, not because I doubted it, because I wanted to feel it completely. Renee called me the following Wednesday. Josie, I have to tell you, you have grounds to press criminal charges. Elder financial exploitation under Georgia law. The DA's office has already been in contact with me. Judge Holloway forwarded her concerns directly. With the browser history, the account transfers, and Dorothy's testimony, the case is strong. I was quiet for a moment. He's still my son, Isaiah said. I know. Her voice was gentle. But people like this don't stop unless they face real consequences. And I'll ask you to think about the next woman whose son has her power of attorney. I thought about that woman. I didn't know her name. But I knew her. I had been her. File it, I said. The DA's office moved efficiently. Darnell was charged with elder financial exploitation. His employer, one of the largest insurance firms in Atlanta, terminated him the day the arrest made the local news. In the financial services industry, trust is the entire product. There is no recovering from a headline that reads, "Financial manager charged with exploiting own mother." Darnell took a plea agreement, 3 years probation, community service, full restitution of legal fees, and a permanent criminal record. He would never work in finance again. Brittany filed for divorce before the criminal sentencing. Dorothy called me the week after and we talked for an hour. She cried. I did not tell her there was nothing to forgive, because there was something to forgive, and we both knew it. But I told her she had done a brave thing in that courtroom, that it had mattered. Marvella Davis's nephew eventually apologized, she said. I don't know if Darnell will. I'm not waiting for it, I said honestly. Darnell sent one letter during his probation period. 4 pages, handwritten. I read it once, carefully, the way I read anything that requires careful reading. There were explanations and justifications and a paragraph near the end that came close to an apology without quite arriving at one. I folded it, put it in the desk drawer in Raymond's study. I didn't burn it. Burning it would have meant it still had power over me. The drawer felt more accurate, acknowledged, contained, no longer able to do damage. The restraining order remained in effect. Darnell was not permitted within 500 feet of me or my property without my written consent. I heard updates through the ordinary channels of a small community. Gloria, the women from church, a mutual acquaintance here and there. Darnell had taken work in warehouse management. He'd moved into an apartment in College Park. He looked, by all accounts, like a man who had lost the version of himself he'd been constructing for years and hadn't yet figured out what came next. I felt nothing particular when I heard these things. Not satisfaction, not guilt, not the grief I had expected. Just nothing. The particular quiet of a wound that has been properly cleaned and is now simply healing. The woman who had loved Darnell the way I had loved him. The woman who had sold her mother's ring for him. Who had heard him say, "You're the only one who never makes me feel small," and kept it in her heart for 27 years. That woman was still in me somewhere, but she was no longer the one running things. One morning in April, 7 months after the courtroom, 6 months after the criminal charges, I walked out to the backyard before coffee. The magnolia was blooming, not just a few early flowers the way it sometimes started in late March. Full bloom. The whole tree covered in white, the blossoms the size of teacups, the smell of them filling the whole yard and drifting over the fence to where Gloria's garden began. I stood under the branches in my housecoat and looked up through the canopy of white flowers and early morning sky. Gloria came through the back gate, the way she always did on mornings she knew I needed company without wanting to ask for it. She stood beside me and we both looked up for a while without speaking. Then she said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it honestly. Not the easy answer, the real one. "Like myself," I said finally. "For the first time in a long time. Exactly like myself." Gloria put her arm around me. We stood there under Raymond's magnolia tree in the April morning, 2 women in our 60s who had lived long enough to know that the most important things are almost never the big dramatic moments. They are the ordinary mornings, the coffee, the friend who comes through the back gate without being asked, the tree that blooms every spring regardless of what the winter was. "Raymond would be proud," Gloria said. I considered that. "Raymond would have said I should have called a lawyer sooner." Gloria laughed. I laughed. And the magnolia bloomed above us, white and enormous and entirely indifferent to whether anyone gave it permission. I want to say something to you directly before we finish. Not advice, not a lesson, just something I want you to hear from one woman to another. There is a story they tell about women our age. Women who are 60, 65, 70. The story says we are past the hardest part, that we have earned our rest, that we should let the younger people handle things now, let go of the reins, allow ourselves to be taken care of. It sounds kind when they tell it. It is not always meant kindly. I signed those papers because I was tired and overwhelmed, and because the person handing me the pen was my son, and I still believed, even then, even as something in me knew, that he would not truly hurt me. I signed them because I had spent 63 years doing things for other people and had not yet fully learned to fight for myself. I am 64 now. I have learned. Here is what I know. Your age is not a diagnosis. Your independence is not a symptom to be managed. The fact that you live alone, or that you sometimes feel uncertain, or that the stairs are steep, or that the world moves faster than it used to, none of that is evidence that you cannot be trusted with your own life. If someone is telling you otherwise, if someone is using your age or your health or your loneliness as a reason to take your power, listen to the thing inside you that feels wrong about it. The thing that felt wrong in me was not confusion. It was wisdom. I just hadn't trusted it yet. Trust it. Find your Gloria. Find your Renee Patton. Call the lawyer. Go to the courthouse. Put your hand on whatever it is that holds your life together and refuse to let it go without a fight. You are allowed to fight. You are never too old to fight. And you are never, not for one single day of your life, too old to bloom. Raymond planted that magnolia 26 years ago. It's still blooming. So am I.